بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. Today's talk on Ibn Taymiyyah, not Taymiyyah, Taymiyyah. That's why there are too many Y's and I's in the middle. T-A-M-I, some people make it two Y's, some people make it one Y, Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah, his full name was Ahmad ibn Abd al-Halim ibn Abd al-Salam ibn Taymiyyah. Now, the reason people mention his grandfather's names and grandmother was that the other three were scholars. His father was a scholar and he was the chief lecturer at the Umayyad Mosque, Al-Jami' al-Amawi in Damascus. His grandfather was a bigger scholar than the father, but not than Ibn Taymiyyah himself. And the grandfather's mother was a great scholar. Her name was Taymiyyah. She was such a great scholar that her son named himself after her. Who was, as we said, Abd Salam, named himself Ibn Taymiyyah after his mother. And because the mother was so famous, the whole family were called after her. All the family were called the children of Taymiyyah, the grandmother. Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah was not born in Syria. He was born in Syria, but not the Syria that we know today. The Syria that was at the time extended into most of Turkey today. But remember when we did about Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, Muawiyah expanded the Muslim state till north, till Ankara, some more than about 200 miles inside Turkey now. Right? Anyway, he was born in a town called Harran, which is not far away from the present borders between Syria and Turkey. His family had to emigrate to Syria, to Damascus, because the Mughals attacked, and wherever they attacked, they almost savaged the whole place, plagued the place, killed, raped, etc. So the whole family fled from the Mughals attack when Ibn Taymiyyah was 7 years old. They fled to Damascus. They lived in Damascus, and soon they made their mark, the father and the son. Before we talk about Ibn Taymiyyah, let's talk about the time of Ibn Taymiyyah. He was born 661 Hijri, which is in the Christian era, 1261. Just happened to be like this, really. And then he died 728, which is in the Christian era, 1328. It was easy to remember. Very important events happened before. 656. That is 656, just 6 years before he was born. The Mughals attacked Holako, attacked Baghdad, and burnt it, plagued it, destroyed everything there. Holako, who attacked Baghdad, was the son of Genghis Khan, who started this Mughals. They are called also the Mongols. They come originally from Mongolia. So they were just unstoppable, right? Savage, powerful, great fighters. They reached Baghdad, destroyed Baghdad. This is another talk about them. Then they went further west towards Syria and Egypt. They attacked Syria a few times, and then they went to Egypt. Egypt at that time was ruled by a dynasty called Al-Mamalik. Al-Mamalik means the slaves. They called them the slaves. We'll come back to this after. It's very important because they ruled the Muslim, well, the Middle East for something like 270 years till the Ottomans took over. Briefly, after the Khulafa al-Rashidin, we had the Umayyad ruling the Muslim world, right? Based in Syria, starting from Muawiyah time, radiallahu anhu. They lasted for 91 years, from 41 Hijri till 132 Hijris. The Abbasids, which were the descendants of Al-Abbas, the Prophet's uncle, that's what they called Al-Abbasids. They found that using the name of Al-Abbas will give them more popularity because Al-Abbas was a very popular man in Islam, plus the Prophet's uncle, supporter, and with them themselves, Abbasids ruled for the next 400 years. During the first 50, 60 years of Al-Abbasi's rules, that from 130, well, for 70 years, till the year 200, there was no ideological problems in Islam. Till the Shias, the Sufis, the Khawarij, the Mu'tazila, we talked about this last time. Then during that time, about the year 200, which was the year that Harun Rashid just died, his son Al-Ma'mun took over, and the famous Imam at the time was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. After a struggle with them for 30 years, then the Sunni took back the state, and then it became Sunni state for the next 60, 70, 80, 100 years almost. But then the Shia start creeping in, right? And they've got their ways because of taqiyya, that means lying, and not special lying. They're not liars all the time. In their religion, you only lie to the Sunnis. That's it, really. They don't lie somewhere else. They don't lie to the Americans or to the Israelis, to anybody. They're very clear. But to the Sunnis, they lie. Honestly, that's in there. So because of this, people don't know them. They think they are, they sound, we are Muslim brothers, we are the same people, the unity of Islam, etc. Anyway, so the Shia were influencing the leaders who were weak. Now, after Al-Ma'mun, after Al-Mu'tasim, Mu'tasim was a powerful man, the son of Harun Rashid. Al-Mutawakkil, then the Abbasid leaders became weaker. The Shia were getting stronger. The Abbasids felt that they were used by the Shias and they had no power to fight them back. So they had to give them many sensitive positions in the state. So what the Abbasids did, took a few generations to do that quietly without the Shia noticing that. To overcome their weaknesses, they brought many, they called them slaves, who were the captive people from what we call now Chechnya and south of Chechnya. They called the Cherkess. I don't know what's the name in English, but from that part of the world, those people look Europeans and they're quite good fighters, very strong in their Aqidah, in their Sunni Aqidah, etc. So they brought a lot of them and they enrolled them in the army. They brought so many of them that those people, they liked it and they took over, as simple as this, and they were called Al-Mamalik, right? They removed the Shia and the Arab Sunnis, right? And they took over the state. But after a while, before they took over, actually, to be honest, what happened that because of that struggle there between Shia Sunnis, the state was busy, the leaders were weak. You only need one strong leader to make a lot of difference. Because of this, and another reason as well, we'll come to this after. So when the Mamluks got stronger, in Baghdad, the Ismaili at that time, which was the worst Shia group, the Ismaili at the time somehow moved to North Africa. And by the year 300 Hijri, they took over all of North Africa, from Morocco to Cairo, to Egypt. It was them who built actually Cairo. It was them who built Al-Azhar University, Al-Azhar Mosque, right? And they were very horrible to the Sunnis. On the minbar, on the Jum'ah, insulting Abu Bakr, Umar, and Aisha. That's a must for them. Killing the scholars who stood in their way. Exactly like what's happening in Iraq and Syria now, really. And Yemen under the Houthis. Open war on the Sahabas. For 200 years. And really, thousands and thousands of Muslim scholars were perished fighting them or opposing them. Because of now, we've got the Ismailis in North Africa, that's almost half the Muslim state. And in the East, Baghdad and Syria, etc., in these circumstances, who grew up in strength? The Sufis. So we have the Sufis and the Shias, and they both have a lot of things in common, and that's a lot of nonsense. One is Sunni nonsense, the other is Shia nonsense. Nonsense I'm saying about in their beliefs, in their practices. Those two enemies of Islam, the enemy from within and the enemy from without, weakened the Islamic State so much that the Crusades came and took over the whole of Middle East, almost the whole of it. Well, from Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Jordan, all the part of Turkey that was Muslim. The Crusades came and took over Jerusalem. Luckily, we'll have to make special lecture on that, how Salah ad-Din managed to beat them. And then he established his own sons before he died. He divided his small empire, not small, medium-sized empire, which included Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, and Iraq. He divided that into his sons who were not as good as he was. Then the Mamluk, those were the slaves called the Al-Mamalik, not Al-Mamalik, they took over, right? As I said, they were Sunnis, but by that time they were influenced by the Sufis, but they were not quite Sufis, I must admit, really. They were not. They were open to reason. As I said, their background was very strong Sunnis. So it wasn't easy to convert them into Shi'ism or extreme Sufism. Give them that, right? So now the Mughals came and took over. As I said, they destroyed the Islamic Khilafah in Baghdad, 656 Hijri, which is in Christian era would be 1258 or 56, something, but 56, 58, or no, 56 till 56, 1256. They took over, and then they moved, they took over Syria, and then they came to fight Egypt. If they took over Egypt, by the way, Salah ad-Din, before he fought the Crusades, I have to admit that, somehow, as I said, that needs a lot of explanation, somehow he finished off all the Shia dominance of North Africa. That's just as a great feat as liberating Al-Aqsa from the Crusades. He liberated all of he just finished off the Shia once and for all from the whole of North Africa. Why? Because their headquarters was, or the capital was in Cairo. He took over from there, and overnight he banned all their books, all their ceremonies, all their schools, whatever they were doing against the Sahaba, overnight back to Sunni Islam, really. As I said, that's just as a great feat as liberating Al-Aqsa. So the Shia now threat removed from the Muslim empire, but then the Sufi one became, and then the Shia still, they are there. There were pockets of them everywhere, but not in North Africa, really. But they were in Syria, in Iraq, in Turkey now, in Iran, in the eastern part. still there. He couldn't do that. He didn't live long. Salah ad-Din, he died 1193, which he was 57 years old only, right? Now, so at the time of Ibn Taymiyyah, so all right, so the Mughals now came towards Egypt to attack it. If they conquered Egypt, that would have finished the whole Muslim world, because that was the strongest, the only remaining powerful entity in the Muslim world. They destroyed all the eastern part of the Muslim world, from Palestine east to Pakistan, India, and the Central Asia. That was all under their grip. Now what they're left with is North Africa. The Mamalik accepted the challenge, defeated them in the Battle of Ain Jalut 1260, which is 660, the year before Ibn Taymiyyah was born. Defeated them badly. They sent more forces, etc. Between that time and the next 50, 60 years, they had many attempts, the Mughals, to come back. By that time, Ibn Taymiyyah was growing up, and another change happened to the Mughals. The Mughals converted to Shia Islam. Really, after they were beaten, they converted to Shia Islam. Being Shia Islam, they were very anti-Sunnis. That's what they learned, the first thing. So they have aligned themselves with the Crusades. All the Salah ad-Din liberated Jerusalem, but not all of Palestine, not all of Syria. He didn't have the time. I said he died early. A few years after, 2-3 years after he liberated Jerusalem, he died. So they allied themselves with the Crusades and the Alawites, which is the most extreme of the Shia, the Ismailis, and they were trying to take over Syria again and over Iraq. So there was many wars between the Sunnis from one side and the alliance of the Ismailis, the Mughals, many that lasted till the next really 50, 60 years, or even 100 years. All they called themselves Muslims, but many Muslims did not accept that really. So Ibn Taymiyyah grew in that time where there was the Shia onslaught, the Mughals, as well as the Sufis and their nonsense. You remember when he made the talk on Sufis? I showed you some of their nonsense, that they walk on fire, they put skewers in their eyes, and they spread this as being they are the walis of Allah, the saints, right? Ibn Taymiyyah grew up in Damascus. Said his father was the main speaker, or not, teacher at the Masjid, the Umayyad Mosque. His father died when he was 22 years old. By that time, Ibn Taymiyyah, at 22 years old, was considered to be a scholar. He had very high IQ, outstanding man. He said about himself, if I look at any page, I'll memorize it straight away. If I hear any speech, I memorize it for good all the time. One story just to tell you about his talents, that when he was younger, 15, 16 years old, his father told him, one day, we're going to the countryside, to a farm, come and let's spend a day, take a day off. He said, no, I want to stay at home. He didn't go this far, and brothers. When his father came in the evening, he said to him, son, look, we had a good time in the farm there were rivers, water, etc. Why did you not come with us? He said, father, I have memorized a book, not one paper, a book. He said, a book? Said, he tested him, he memorized every single word in the book. When he was younger, the sheikh who was teaching him Quran, he was 7, 8 years old, offered him some money. He said to him, I vow to Allah not to take money for Quran, teaching or learning it. That's at very age, that young age. Ibn Taymiyyah spent all his life from either listening to scholars, and he met 200 scholars, and he called them his teachers. He learned from 200 scholars, either listening to scholars, or giving talks himself, or reading, or writing. Dedicated his time to Islam 24 hours a day. You will never see him wasting time doing anything else. That's why he spent all his life not married. He didn't have time to marry. All the time he was, as I did, either reading, writing, listening, or talking himself. The problems he saved at that time was the Sufis and the Ash'aris, the Mu'tazilas that we did them last week. All those people were spreading the wrong aqidah, a lot of nonsense in the Muslim world, and they were accepted by the state. The Mamalik accepted them. That's what was available. And they were showing to people, illiterate people, signs of their power. And they think all the tricks they did, like walking on the fire, or poking themselves with knives or something, or planting knives in their heads, they told people that's because we are the walis of Allah. And he said, no, these were tricks. This is lies. This is the walis of Allah don't do such thing. The walis of Allah read Quran, they know Hadith. They don't do these tricks, which even the Hindus can do. Right? So that's one thing. The other thing is the more intellectual ones, the Mu'tazila and the people of reasoning. The Mu'tazila, and to a lesser degree, the Ash'aris, they believe that reasoning can check the text. If there is a text not from Allah, the Mu'tazila did challenge Allah, but the Ash'ari didn't. The Ash'ari accepted everything in the book of Allah as it is. The Mu'tazila and the Ash'aris said all text, as I said, the Ash'aris, they left the Quran alone, but the Ash'aris, the Mu'tazila and the Ash'aris, every other text, the Hadith, what scholars say, etc., they just, what they do, they said it has to be reasonably acceptable, right? Ibn Taymiyyah said, no, if the text is correct, if the text is right or authentic, that's the word I'm looking for. If the text is authentic, then it must be right. Then he spent his life, Ibn Taymiyyah, proving that all Islamic texts, all Islamic authentic texts, or the Quran or Hadith, all of them are within reason and there's no conflict. He wrote about 10 books on that subject, Al-Aql wal-Naql, reasoning and texts. And he says, that's what he believed in, that there is no conflict between human reasoning and Islamic text. But the other side preferred the conflict. Why? Then they can find a way in through their tricks and to impress people. Well, he believed that you have to impress people with the reality of Islam. But if you are weak, then you bring tricks. That's why, just on a side issue, all religions and movements in the world and in history have symbols. That's my own observations, nothing to do with Taymiyyah. Have symbols, except Islam. We don't have symbol. The Christians have the cross, the Jews have the star, the Hindus have a sign, the Sikhs have a sign. Everybody has got a sign. Why? Because the sign helps them to express themselves. They've got difficulty, so they hide behind the sign, right? But we in Islam, we don't have a sign. This is star and this crescent, etc. This is the Uthman invented them. Nothing wrong with them, but they don't represent Islam, really. I mean, there was no crescent or star during the Prophet time. We don't have a sign. We don't need it. As simple as this. See, when you are unable to express yourself, you use your hands, you use a sign, you use a symbol, isn't it? This is a sign of weakness, the symbols. Anyway, so Ibn Taymiyyah believed that there is no conflict between aql and naql. That's one of his great achievements. They start writing. But not only the Shia, the Ismailis, the Ash'aris, the Mu'tazila that he confronted. He refuted all those by writing, by the way. He was writing all the time and debating with them personally. He came again across the Greek philosophers. He proved that this Aristotle, the great thinker of the Greek, that the whole world celebrates him, he proved him wrong. That is why I sent you this about this Nottingham University plus 6 other universities, Western universities, 2 in Britain, Oxford and Nottingham, and 4 in America, studying Ibn Taymiyyah. They think he is better than this Aristotle. And when I say studying, it doesn't mean that they are allowing students to do PhDs. That's happening. They've got departments studying Ibn Taymiyyah. This Nottingham University, that Dr. Hoover has got a team with him in the Islamic department there studying Ibn Taymiyyah. And those teams, if you go on the internet, you'll find a lot of them making presentations about Ibn Taymiyyah. And something like 20, 30 people there who are interacting with them. That means quite few people in Nottingham University at least, but similar things, and I've got the links for them, those people studying Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah, people think now, those thinkers now, think he is not a historical personality, he is a present day scholar. Whatever he said is acceptable today. It makes reason today. It makes sense today. He refuted the Christians. He wrote a book, القول الصريح في من بدل دين المسيح. The true word about those, or the explicit word refuting those who changed the religion of Al-Masih, Isa alayhi salam. The Hindus, those people who believed in the kalam, that means the people who believe in debates and arguments. The Jews, he had a debate with the Jew, the rabbi of Damascus, and he converted him. And whatever he did, he was writing all the time. He wrote so many books, you can't believe it. Books, we're not talking about booklets or letters. 590 plus books he wrote. Always writing non-stop, this man. His students became all-time great scholars of Islam, like Ibn Kathir, the great mufassir of the Quran, was one of his students. Ibn Qayyim was almost as good as he was, but not as good, but that was his best student. Al-Dhahabi. So his students became Suyuti. Really, he produced many top scholars as well. So debating with those people, etc., caused him a lot of troubles with the state. His main debate was with those Sufis who believe in Wahdat al-Wujud, in the whole universe is one, or God can come down and dissolve himself in somebody, that's Ittihad, or somebody can go up and join God himself as well. Hulul, Ittihad, all these types of physical connection with Allah, he proved it right in debates, with debates. He was brought many times to the palace where the leaders were there called kings. The local kings belonged to the main king, which was in Egypt, in Syria. There was king of Damascus, king of Aleppo, king. Wherever he went, the Sufis would make complaint about him, and that put him into a lot of trouble that we'll talk about him. But he proved all these things. He proved all these things about, unification with Allah, etc. This is shirk. He refuted again all the Shias, whatever you can think of, about their dispute with Abu Bakr, Umar, Aisha radiallahu anha, about the Imams, again, all in writing. So he was a problem actually to all those people, and they all combined to plot against him. And they managed by locking him up in prison for many years. We'll come to that with the details. With the Christians, just to finish off, what he did about Christians, and if you read his books about Christians, refuting the Christians and the Judaism, you will say that he is Didat and Zakir Naik combined. He give you references from the Bible, whatever he reads, he just give references, just exactly like, you know, how Didat and this Zakir Naik, and this page, etc., and this verse. He was debating with the Madhabis, those people who believe in the Mazhab. He was never against the Madhabs, by the way. He loved the 4 Imams, but he disagreed with them in some matters. But we could see the love and respect he has for the Imam. He didn't believe that all the Imams are right in all the matters. He believed that they were right on some matters and wrong on other matters, and that's why they differed. In many cases, he would agree with one Imam or the other on some matters, but not with one Imam at all the time. All those background is Hanbali. His father was a Hanbali, his grandfather was a Hanbali, probably his grandmother was Hanbali as well. It must be. They're all Hanbalis. He was too good to belong to a school. So when he writes about one matter, he says, this matter Abu Hanifa was right. The other matter, he said this was right, this Imam. And in other matters, he believed that all of them were wrong. And he brings his argument. I'll give you an example where, for example, he said all of them were wrong, right? But this is what matters really. What matters, they are right because we know that they were right most of the time. But we cannot believe that they were right all the time. This only applies to the Messenger of Allah. Right? We cannot say the Imams were right all the time. We cannot say anybody was right all the time, okay? Because to be right all the time, you got to be supported by Allah, and that's only for prophets. Because if the prophets make mistake, Allah corrects them. Or before they speak, Allah inspires them, right? So the Prophet made few mistakes, Allah corrected him. But when he didn't make the mistakes, Allah was inspiring him. So throughout his life, he was either inspired or guided by Allah, right? But that's only for a prophet. For anybody to claim that, he's a liar, right? Like some Sufis claim, really. They claim that they are inspired by Allah. And the Shia believe that their Imam is inspired by Allah. What's the proof? It's got to be from the Quran, right? So in his debates with I'll just give you an interesting story. Once he would use his knowledge about the Mazhab or the creed that he's debating, but his knowledge would be better than the one who's debating with. One day, a Maliki scholar complained to the king of Damascus. No, he was in Cairo. He was traveling between Cairo and Egypt, and he was in prison in both places. And in Alexandria, he was in prison there as well. He complained to the king there. He said, "This man has been ill speaking of you. He's got plots against you." So the king asked Ibn Taymiyyah. He said, "How defend yourself?" He said, "Before I defend myself, in the Maliki Madhab it says, if anybody makes unreasonable accusation, he should be disciplined." So this is an unreasonable accusation for someone like me. I've never said anything about you in public, so he should be disciplined and go to and this man apologized straight away. That's how good he was. So from your own mazhab, and that's not in any other mazhab. There's no madhab in the world other than the Maliki who says if you make, all the other mazhabs say if you make accusation, you got to bring a proof, isn't it? That's a reasonable thing. Except in the Maliki says if you cannot bring a proof, then you have to be disciplined. You won't get away with it. This is one of his debates. Right. Now, because of his stand against, exposing those people, he became very popular among the masses. I mean, masses, ordinary people, businessmen, traders, local scholars, etc., were impressed by the Sufi's tricks. Everybody could be impressed, really, right? What they're doing, because nobody can put skew on his eye or something. But then when he opened their eyes, it's Ibn Taymiyyah, this is all nonsense, it's haram, etc. Then people suddenly realized we've been misled by our Maulanas, local Maulanas, for centuries. This is not Islam. So he became very popular. His popularity made those people jealous. So they started complaining to the king. Sometimes the kings or the rulers would listen to them. Sometimes he wouldn't. But in one of the places, for example, let's talk about his prisons now. How he spent time, why he spent time in his prison. I'll put it somewhere here. Yes. Yes. He went to prison. First time he went to prison, he saw a Christian in Damascus insulting the Prophet ﷺ. So he went and beat him up badly. The Christian complained to the king put Ibn Taymiyyah in prison, not that Christian. So while he is in prison, he wrote a book which is going to last till the day of judgment. Really. This book called الصارم المسلول في من شتم الرسول. The drawn sharp one, he means the sword, against those who insult the messenger. He proved in his book from Quran and Sunnah, insulting the Prophet means a death penalty, regardless whether you make tawbah or not. Say sorry. Once you insult the Prophet, you have to be killed. For those who think that he did not love the Prophet or he didn't have, he said, if you insult the Prophet, the penalty is death. And thus that book still around, right? The second time, he spent a few days only for that. The second time he went to prison, that he confronted those people who say about Wahdat al-Wujud, that the whole world is one. Ibn Arabi's, they were very famous at that time. Ibn Arabi, Bustami, those great, not great, so-called great, or founders of the Sufis, extreme orders, about unification with Allah, etc. He spent something like 8 months in prison because he refused them. So you can't. He said, if you say this is kufr. We cannot be equated to Allah, no matter how good you are. You can't. The prophets couldn't. So how the hell are you? Another time he went to prison as well. You know, in the Quran and in the Sunnah, it's important for us to know this matter. That divorce, Allah says, الطلاق مرتان فإمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان. Allah said, divorce is done over 3 periods. No, 2 periods, Allah says. 2 periods. And then after that, either you keep her in good manner, I mean, look after her and treat her well, بمعروف, or release her. That means the 3rd talaq, again, in good manners. Allah wants us to be good to the women, either to when we keep them or when we divorce them. But it's very clear from the Quran, the way Allah put it, he didn't say 3 times, but it's very clear, it doesn't need any interpretation. Very clear, the talaq is 3 times. He said 2, and after the 2, your 3rd time will be the last one, or you keep her after 2 you can. Very clear. This was the laws that used during the Prophet time and during part of Umar's Khilafah. Umar noticed that the people were abusing the talaq. I don't know how, to be honest. So he said, anyone he makes talaq 3 times in one sitting, it's valid. The whole Muslim scholars and the Sahaba accepted that. And we know Umar was a special case where the Prophet told us, عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين من بعدي. Abide by my sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided Khalif after me. So whatever the Khalifas, not the Sahabas in general, the Khalifas, the 4 Khalifas, and the Prophet mentioned the 4 many times about who the Khalifas were. So he said the Khulafa if they make a sunnah, and we talked about them, do you remember? We talked about they wrote the Quran, sunnah, the Salat al-Tarawih is a new sunnah. 3-4 things. They didn't do too many things. One of the things that Abu Umar did, he said, 3 times at one go is valid. The 4 Imams accepted that. Ibn Taymiyyah said, no, we cannot accept it. What Umar did, radiallahu anh, and he was very respectful to Umar, by the way. I mean, he was respectful to the 4 Imams, so he was more respectful even to the Sahaba. He was fighting the Shia all his life because of their attack on the Sahaba. But he said what Umar did was a specific case. Umar said people were abusing the talaq then. And now people are abusing the talaq now by, out of temperament, a man in one sitting divorced his wife 3 times and she's finished. We have to go back to the original sunnah. The 4 Imams and their followers stood up against him for that, and they imprisoned him for 6 months for that. It took to the 20th century, 700 years after, because he died 700 years ago, that now this talaq, that Ibn Taymiyyah's a new talaq, is being accepted in a lot of Muslim countries. Al-Azhar, which is Ash'ari and anti-Ibn Taymiyyah, recently accepted Ibn Taymiyyah's form of talaq, that as in the Quran originally 3 times. That's Al-Azhar. Many Muslim scholars are accepting this. And to be honest, this is, it makes more sense now. Umar did not say what Allah said is wrong or what his messenger did was wrong. He said, because of the abuse, I'm making it 3 in 1. But we scholars say that abuse is not there. We don't know what abuse people were using, because there was no explanation of that. From what it looks like, it's 3, and more and more people going to this talaq, right? Another time he went to prison was the visiting of the graves, on the visiting of the graves. And he spent there the last 2 years of his life in the prison, from 726 to 728. He said, the Prophet ﷺ said, you should not make intention of traveling except to 3 places. Al-Masjid al-Haram, Mecca, wa Masjidi hada, my mosque, and Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. In another hadith, the salah in Masjid al-Haram is equivalent to 100,000 salah. The salah in the Prophet's mosque is 1,000 salah. The salah in the Al-Aqsa is 500 salah. People were visiting the graves, and you know, a lot of Sufis are Qabr Farjari or something that is in Urdu, or Burjaris. A lot of people go and seek help from the graves. And it could be, as we found out from last week, that in the grave there could be a French dog or an Egyptian cow or nothing. One of the graves they dug out in Egypt after 2 families fighting. I told you about the cow. There's another story. They wanted to move the grave for some reason. The 2 families, again, there's always competition there. So they wanted to move it, and then they were waiting for the government official. So the government official did not come till late at night. They waited till nearly Fajr, and the government official did not come. So they said, we'll move it ourselves. We don't need government official. So when they dug the grave, they found nobody there. So one of them said, he knew we want to move him, so he moved by himself. Right. So he moved by himself. Right. So people were going to the grave till now. I mean, so they go there and seek help from, as I said, it could be anything, or assume he was a good man, or assuming the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ did not say, come to my grave to seek help. If he said this, not a single Sahabi would have left Medina. Right? You go to the Prophet's grave and you make a dua for him. Right? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. May Allah be pleased with you, for you have given us the message complete. We are Muslims because of you. We praise him there. To seek help, why? Great as he was, Allah is greater. So people were making visits to the graves. Then somebody said, oh, he meant the Prophet's grave. We should make visit to it. He said, yes, you should not make an intention to go to seek help or from the Prophet's grave. All right? You are insulting the Prophet, 6 months in prison. No, 2 years, till he died. He put him there forever. What he was saying very clearly, the Sunnah is to visit the Prophet's mosque. If you want to visit the Prophet's grave, visit him, but not with the intention of making a prayer, seeking help. This is shirk. Because Allah doesn't accept shirk with Isa. Will he accept shirk with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? As simple as this. There's no difference between Isa and Muhammad, peace be upon both of them, isn't it? They were both great prophets. So Allah called the whole Christians as mushrikeen because they associated him with Isa. So we can do the same. So we love the Prophet, then he can help. Why can he help? Why? Anyway, so he wrote a book on that, and then they got mad and they put him in prison, and he spent the last 2 years of his life there. While he's in prison, he said he went to prison 7 times. I mentioned three or four of them. The Christians, the Wahdat al-Wujud one, the Talaq, and Ziyad Qubur. I mentioned 4. But he mentioned other places. It was always intriguing and always plots against him. While he was in the prison, he turned the prisons into rehabilitation centers. There were petty criminals there. Suddenly they start praying. Suddenly they start attending his circles. And when the time for them to leave, they wouldn't leave the prison. How can we leave Ibn Taymiyyah alone? There's no teacher outside. Like some of them came out scholars. 2-3 years in the prison with Ibn Taymiyyah, I mean, the best teacher, right? Anyway, so he stayed there till he died there. Another aspect of his life really is his jihad. The Muslims were defeated many times. His time is very similar to our time. There's 2 more aspects we have to talk in the next 10-15 minutes, and that's his jihad and why he's been quoted by 2 different sides. Remind me, Sheikh Hazad, of that. One side is those who are pro-government, and one side those who are fighting the government. Write it down, Sheikh Hazad. That he was attacked, he was quoted by 2 opposing sides. Those who are pro-governments and those who are attacking the governments. The time of Ibn Taymiyyah was very similar to our time, where Muslims were defeated many times. There's a lot of bid'ah around, bid'ah the Sufis, the Shias, we have now the secularists, the liberals. We had at that time the Mu'tazilites and the Khawarij, who were again just arguing all the time, just for the sake of arguing to prove Muslims wrong all the time. So, plus there were the thinkers who called themselves thinkers who learned some philosophy either from Hindus in the East or from Greek in the West, right? The Mughals still had plans for Syria, right? And they were defeated. They couldn't go further to Egypt, but there's still a lot of them around Syria, Iran, Iraq. They made advances to Syria, to Damascus a few times, at one time actually, but before he was born, they attacked it and they killed from the Hanbali, them and the Ismailis. They killed the Hanbalis, some 3,000 men and raped their women, etc. Right? So when they made plan now, during his lifetime, they attacked Syria 3 or 4 times. The 4th time they attacked it, he started now. He didn't take part in the war somehow, I don't know why. And the 4th time they attacked, he started, they were bringing their forces, getting closer to Syria, or preparing themselves. The news arrived in Syria or Damascus that the Mughals are coming. So he started going around and telling people, we have to do jihad. We have to stand up to them. They're too powerful, we can't. He said, well, if we can, then they will kill us. They'll take our women, our children. They'll kill us anyway. They destroy, they burn everywhere they go to. Then he went to the main king in Egypt, the Egyptian king of the same thing, Nasir al-Din something, Al-Mansur. He went to him and convinced him he should send an army to defend Damascus. After some persuasion, the Mansur agreed, and he put a condition on him. He said, I want you to be by my side. He said he'll come himself, which he did really give him that. I told you the Mamalik were good, right? Although they put him in prison many times, but really because of the influence of their ministers and the scholars around them. But anyway, so the Mansur said, I want you to be, he said, no, I will be in the battlefield, but the Sunnah is to be with your own people, to support each other. I would be with the people of Damascus. He agreed. They brought a big contingency, big army from the Mamluks of Egypt, and they just managed to be there before the Mughals arrived in Damascus. The two armies met in a battle called Shakhab. This was the first time Ibn Taymiyyah fights. He asked someone who was a learned man or experienced, a military man from the Muslim side. He said to him, which is the worst place to be in this battlefield? That means the most dangerous. He pointed out to him that place. On his horse, that man is saying the story, not Ibn Taymiyyah. He said, he asked me, which is the worst place in the battlefield? He pointed out somewhere where there was a lot of intense fighting. He said he headed that way. I didn't see him after that till the end of the battle when he was chasing the Mughals who were running away. They defeated the Mughals badly, so badly that they never came back really, till 100 years after. Anyway, they defeated them, and alhamdulillah, so he was defending Islam physically as well as intellectually. Right? Now, coming back to the thing, what Shahzad Tilmani, I still remember them. Right? Anyway, it won't do harm writing them down. What is his stand regarding the government? That's what people wanted to know, because now all those so-called ISIS, Qaeda, jihadists, people who are pro-government, both sides quoting Ibn Taymiyyah said that, Ibn Taymiyyah said that. Ibn Taymiyyah was very clear about his confrontation with the leaders, with the rulers. First of all, he did not treat all rulers the same. When the Mughals came to attack Damascus, they were rulers of Iraq and Iran at the time, and northern Syria, must admit, yeah. What's left for them is the central Syria and Damascus, the capital. He went and confronted the ruler there called Mahmud Ghazan. I said they converted to Shi'ism and they called themselves Muslims. Mahmud Ghazan said to him, why are you opposing us? And they were very vicious people. He went with a group of scholars from Damascus. And usually people who go there to see them, because it was a habit of the Mughals that they would kill the messengers. Whoever, when the armies or people opposite side, they always exchange messengers, ambassadors they called them. And then nobody killed them in the past really, in all civilizations, except the Mughals. They're always killing them. So he went there. Why you oppose? He said, no, you call yourself Muslims. No, you got different laws to Islam. I don't believe you. Right? He said, no, wallah, I swear that I'm Muslim. He said, okay, you're not Muslim, and we will fight you, as simple as this. This Mahmud Ghazan was a very vicious man. He was so impressed with the courage of this man, because it's not normal for someone to talk to him direct like this. The scholars who went with them, they said, when he was talking to Mahmud Ghazan, we would gather our clothes and go distance ourselves from him, just in case his blood spills over our clothes, because they expected that they chopped his head straight away. He was so impressed, this Mahmud Ghazan. He said, I'm not going to kill you. Do you have any wish? He said, I want all the Syrian prisoners that you took from the farms, from their land, to come with me, to release them. He said, we'll release them for you. He said, including the Christians ones. He said, what's that got to do with you? He said, they live under our protection. You got to release them as well. He went back with the Christians and Muslim prisoners, that this Mahmud Ghazan. Now, this man, although he claimed to be Muslim, Ibn Taymiyyah said openly he was not a Muslim. He is fighting Islam. he is a kafir. Coming to the rulers in Syria and in Egypt, where he had confrontation and they put him in prison many times, he would never call them a kafir. He said, 60 years of being ruled under an oppressor Muslim better than one night without a Muslim leader. Because he knows if there is no Muslim leader, the whole thing will collapse. It was, it's normal. People with intelligence notice this. The Sahaba noticed this. As soon as the Prophet died, their first thing was to establish a leader. And then they said, oh, you left him, you didn't wash him. How come 30,000 people go and wash the Prophet? How? How come the whole of the people of Medina and around it just go and wash him? Oh, while Ali was washing him, you elected a leader. That's the first thing they do. People have to establish a leader, because without it, the whole thing collapses. Umar dying, they said, elect a leader after me. Abu Bakr was dying, said, elected a leader. Anyway. So he said a Muslim leader must be there. But he said the Muslim leader has got to do his duties. His duties have got two important duties for a Muslim leader. The first one is to facilitate an easy worship for the Muslims. That means the mosques should be secured and safe. The zakah should be collected. The road to Mecca should be safe as well. And people should feel safe as a Muslim for their aqidah, their beliefs. So the leader has got to facilitate the easy worship for the Muslims. The second thing, he has got to look after the welfare of the people there. He's not there only just to make his friends and his relatives rich, etc. He said, with this happening, there could be corruption. That they'll accept bribery, they will appoint their relatives, they will misuse the funds. He said, here we look at what we call the maslaha. The maslaha means the benefit of the Muslims. If the Muslims are still benefiting by their benefit better than the harm, then we still obey them bad as they are. And if the harm is more, then we oppose them. And he said, but opposing them would have to be careful. They are vicious. They'll kill a lot of people. And this is happening. Look what's happening in the Muslim world. When we oppose the Muslim leaders, look what's happening. So this is now, so the people who are quoting him when the Muslim leaders are so bad, they are attacking Islam itself. Then the jihadists say, all right, we have to get rid of them because Ibn Taymiyyah said that. And the other side, they say, oh, Ibn Taymiyyah said, even if they're corrupt, you cannot remove them, even if they steal. So both sides are using him, but actually the truth is there's limit to this case and limit to that case. It's not always attack them and not always pro them, right? Ibn Taymiyyah, finally, we are in the last few minutes here. Ibn Taymiyyah is becoming now very famous scholar, now more than ever. One university, I don't know which one, I think a Muslim university, did a study. They found that he is more quoted in our present era than anybody else in Islam other than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Orientalists, Muslim authors wrote on him that for few years ago, up to 80 books have been written about him. People find him relevant to our time now. People are rethinking a lot of our old ideas because of him. I think he will be the future man for the scholar for the future. The difference between him and the four scholars is he was lucky that he had all the knowledge of the four scholars available. That's why we said if Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu came 100 years after, probably he would have taken over all the others. Why? Because the next 100 years after the death of Abu Hanifa, where the hadith was written, right? And now, few hundred years after the four imams, all their work is there. And someone clever like him, and now we've got institutions, etc. We know where is the what we can compare the fatwas of different imams. So he is the future imam, really. That's what I think. As I said, more and more people are going towards his way, and that is choosing an imam. Really, is the imam who is right. And we talked about this last time about the 4 imams. Yeah, one thing he did as well. Really. He wrote 39 books on tafsir of the Quran. 39 books. I mean, 500 and something books is a lot of books, really, that he has written. I think Ibn Taymiyyah is the man to research, everybody. I wish you luck with Ibn Taymiyyah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah, yes, I never heard of this person before. For us, the key guideline is the Holy Quran and the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's what the Holy Prophet said to us.
Yes.
Follow Al-Quran and my Sunnah.
Yes.
And the Rafal. So I'm leaving at that. Regarding this by rulers who are corrupted to the hilt, who rob their people, who are nepotism, poor getting poor and rich getting rich, and they say that's okay, they're Muslims. Well, they might well be Muslims. My personal view is based on the Quran and the Sunnah. They are unjust and cruel, evil people who are destroying their own nation.
True.
So it doesn't matter nominally you're Muslim, you're evil and cruel. Say murderer can be a Muslim.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you don't execute him for his conviction.
But because you have the power to execute him, that's the problem.
Yeah. So if the country is ruled by evil, corrupted people, so-called Muslims,
yes,
then the people shouldn't accept it.
Because they kill so many, that's the problem.
It doesn't matter. It's best to live. Tipu Sultan said, it is best to live one day as a lion than 1,000 days as sheep.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. But I mean, look at
Syria.
Syria.
Best to die if you are being trodden on, you're right, cruelty, evil is done to you and your family and your Kabila.
Yeah, it's true.
And is it worth living?
But
like that?
True, but when you have children, etc., no. Well, I wish things could be done like this. But just give an example of Syria. They tried to get to Bashar al-Assad. What happened? Out of 20 million Sunnis there, 10 have fled the country, 10 are under poverty line, and they are refugees within inside. Brother, 20.
Inshallah, they will win at the end. Inshallah, they will
Inshallah,
win.
Yes.
But if you don't do it, or you accept it,
you will be there forever.
That's the worst.
Very difficult question. True.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Sheikh. Sheikh, I just wanted to say on the similar topic, actually, what you said about accepting rulers and what Uncle was saying as well. We can see that this has caused the greatest suffering which we are seeing right now. What you've just mentioned in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq,
everywhere.
All these dictators. Yeah. Right now, Saudi Arabia is left. May Allah protect it. I mean, in past we had rulers which were tyrant, which were bad. Naturally, they got changed. Doing it this way through revolution and all that, we have seen the results. I think there is no way. I mean, people were better in Gaddafi's time. People say they were better in Saddam's time. People are missing those people who were living there. So I think it's getting quite obvious. And we see programs on TV, how many refugee camps are there, children are, it's just terrible.
Okay, but I'd like to add something else here. That there is a difference as well between our rulers and the rulers in the past. A lot of the past rulers were corrupt, but they were not anti-Islamic. Most of our rulers are anti-Islamic as well. Believe me. I mean, they are closer to the Mughals. Our rulers now, honestly, they're fighting Islam all the time.
Yeah.
But the previous ones, they used to pray Jum'ah, even used to drink, etc. But in front of people, they were good people praying Jum'ah, and they put the Qadis. All their Qadis are pious people, by the way. All the judges. Well, if you look at the judges in Egypt now, If you pray, you go to prison as a judge. You lose your job.
Yeah.
All the judges almost on the Muslim world, most of them in the Arab world, and for sure I know this, are corrupt. They're corrupt. They are anti-Islamic, really. I mean, they look at the trial of Morsi. Look at the trial of Saddam. All the trials that happens. The judges there. So the systems now are really closer to the Mughals. But as I said, one has to be careful when you start a war. You don't know where it ends. There's a big responsibility, wallah, brother.
And there are hadiths about rebelling against Amir, which you have described as well. Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned as well. And